it's a foreign country. Because we grew up with a Victorian.
Do you mind if I smoke? I think I'm going to need a
With
cigarette.
a Victorian, you know, Queen Victoria, that era. Well, we were brought up in that Victorian era type of, although it was King George was on.
And another thing,
But education was Victorian times.
another thing is, we celebrated the Queen's birthday in South Africa. It was a public holiday. It wasn't here.
It was sort of your motherland or your fatherland.
That was the pull to England.
England was our motherland. That's how you grew up.
Yeah. And what was the push from South Africa?
Political.
Well, it was inequality.
Inequality.
No.
It was a
Right, the
separation.
push. No.
The idea was to separate the different types of people
Exactly.
from one another.
Mm-hmm.
They never can. Well, I don't know if you're going to record this because this is all political now.
Yeah.
The Africans weren't allowed to walk in the streets after 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
They had to be in their own areas after 9 o'clock. That's why it was so safe for us to walk about. You know, not meaning that the Africans would.
I was going to say that's a dodgy sentence.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, but that's why they did it.
Yeah.
But you go back now, and it's a different story now.
Now, for me, I wouldn't have said that. To me, the push to leave there was the South African government were Dutch people, and they wanted to break away from the British Empire and become a republic.
Right.
The apartheid system started in 1948.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget that. Well, that's easy.
South Africa was a new country, and it was made up of.
If you study the history of South Africa,
It's like America, Australia.
Jan
It's all
van
made
Riebeeck
up of.
arrived there in 1952, assuming to have his wife with him. 1652. Assuming he had his wife with him, but in those days, we were taught it's impossible for a woman to have travelled all that distance.
In those days, it took months.
But they assumed he had a wife, so, you know.
No, they didn't assume.
But
actually.
when they arrived at the Cape, there was Bushmen, Hottentots, you know.
The Africans, the Africans.
The Africans weren't in the south. They were up in the north.
Right.
But the culture was made up of the whole of the world, really. It's like America and Australia and Canada. You know, people travel. There were a lot of Irish, a lot of English, a lot of Scots, a lot of French. When the French Huguenot started, that's where his lot comes from. And they left France.
What about the
Spain,
Dutch? What about the
it's all
Dutch?
This is what I'm coming
yes,
to.
and Dutch.
Yeah.
A lot. From everywhere.
That's why it's called the Dutch East Indies. Because the Dutch went from the Cape, from the Holland all the way around.
The Dutch East Indies is not South Africa, it's a Dutch East.
I'm coming to that. Because they had to stop at Cape Town because they had to load up with fresh fruit and water. That's why Cape Town is called the Mother City, because it's the oldest city in Cape Town in South Africa.
Right.
They used that as a stop-off, and of course it became, and they went to the East Indies to get spices and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's called the Dutch East Indies, that part of the world.
What we stem from is the mixture of countries all over the world. So, like our cooking, curry, as he told you about the Dutch East Indies, the Malaysians. When we left South Africa, and I would say even when your mother left South Africa 2 years later, to us, there was no such word as Muslim in South Africa. People weren't Muslims. They were Malays. because they came originally from Malaysia.
See, they worked
The
on the
first
boats.
time we knew Muslims in South Africa is when we went back there for holiday. They now became Muslims, but they weren't nowadays. Although they were there,
No,
they were all
they were
Malays.
from Malaysia because they worked on the boats, you see. And as the boats stopped in Cape Town, some of them stayed there. So
They
that's how
jumped ship and thought as a new country they will try and make a living. So,
So-
that's where a lot of our things. Our food.
Your food, yeah. Describe,
That
explain
came
your
from
food.
Malaysia. Now I don't know if you can remember, because your mother hardly made it, because when I made it, I had to give her some. It was a cabbage and cauliflower. What's the word? Breedy.
Breedy.
Breedy. That came from the Dutch. I had a Dutch student, and he told me I made a better breedy than his mother.
And so, did you make that decision to continue to make this kind of food when you came to England?
Well, it's all we knew how to make. It's what our mothers cook. Everybody, they cook what they learned
it
from
was cooking.
their own.
It was cooking to have enough for everybody. That's what it was.
Mm.
You
We
know,
cooked in case somebody turned up at that time when you were going to eat. So when you sat down to eat and any of your friends were there, they would automatically sit and eat with you.
Yeah.
A lot of like the pickled fish and that type of thing, and salt beef was made when the voortrekkers, when people landed, say in Cape Town, but they had to travel inland to stake their claims and to go for the gold rush and make a home,
And you
homestead.
and you
Then they had to prepare and preserve certain things for on their travels, because they wouldn't have a cooker or a fridge. They had to make a fire to cook on. So they preserved the meat by salting it. They made biltong, something I don't eat, but you have to chew it, and it
and you know
keeps
why
you
they
moist
made the
and wet.
biltong? Because when they travelled, couldn't get fresh meat, so
Well, that's
they
what I'm saying.
preserved the biltong. They could
So they made that.
they
That's
could
what I'm
last for
saying.
months.
So there may be more things than that we don't perhaps know of, but that's why that started, that part of the, like here we are used to salt, there we were used to salt beef. Here, very difficult to get.
Yeah. So what did you
Because-
do? Because obviously you can't get the same things here.
Oh no, you can, like I still get salt beef because that is also a Jewish
Right.
food more than anything else. It's a very Jewish thing because they were also like migrating around Europe, you know, and where they lived, they went from pillar to post also. So that's where those things came in.
Of South Africa as a child or growing up is something I'll never forget.
Yes.
And I don't think the kids in this country will ever realize at that time what freedom was really, to walk about in your own area, in your own vicinity, without a care in the world. Because we used to play outside, we used to go up to the river, we used to swim in the river, we used to play football, we could do whatever we wanted. My most devastating, I think, to my father was that when my younger brother had diphtheria,
And even you were sick.
you know, he had to go to a special hospital. And of course my mother took him to the hospital, and it was a hospital for whites only. So my father couldn't visit his own son in the hospital. You know, that's,
I see.
And when he had tonsils removed, the same thing, he was in the white hospital because the birth certificates are white. And his father couldn't visit him because his father was darker. Yeah.
And each people use the advantage of whatever side they could go. Even if it was brother and sister, they would take the advantage of doing it. Now I'll give you I mean, they don't record this. I don't know if you know Uncle Malcolm.
Yeah.
Later on, he's dead now. But Malcolm had a brother, Kenny.
Older than him,
I
that's
know.
6 years.
Yeah, they came over to England in 1948,
Just after the war finished.
just after the war.
And there was
But they only brought Malcolm over. Kenny stayed there.
Malcolm was about 15, 16.
Why did Kenny stay there?
Yeah, yeah. How was Malcolm about 15, 16, eh?
Yeah.
16. And Kenny was about 22. And he was already working.
Oh.
But
So-
Kenny had the advantage of the
Being blue-eyed
political
and blonde.
situation. If you know what I mean.
He was white.
He was blue-eyed and blonde, that's...
Yeah. Because Uncle Henny was the Latergan, you see. And with a name
Dutch.
like Latergan, you don't leave South Africa with not with that type of name. Because it's an Afrikaner name. Although when he came over here, when Uncle Henny came over here, they called him Latigan. But in South Africa, it's Latergan.
Latergan. It's a Dutch.
Dutch, you see. That, as I say, it broke up families,
Yes.
you know. Families took the option of which would benefit them. And the parents would say to those who could, well, go ahead because it's to your advantage,
Yeah.
you know.
You earn better money.
But then it's so ridiculous because then the families drew further and further apart.
So, how do you define your identity?
British. But not English.
Why?
Mainly because through all past memories, through everything, going to school, going to work, on first meeting of everyone I've ever met, one of their first questions will always be, where are you from? I was never seen as English, so I probably always thought of myself as a foreigner.
So, what do you think your mum and dad define themselves as?
South African.
Why?
Some of the memories, they talked a lot about South African, they spoke Afrikaans when they didn't want us to understand, but they, I think mainly because they didn't agree with the politics they came here, not because they didn't like the country.
It's funny because they actually, in their interview, they perceived themselves as British.
That's quite a surprise because, yes, I can see, but I always thought their homeland would have been South Africa.
Yes, because their homeland, or what they call their motherland, they see as England.
Well, that is a surprise because I'm always thinking the opposite. I'm always thinking my homeland or my motherland is South Africa. And that I'd like to go back to see where I'm actually from, my roots. And they thought their roots are English.
Yeah.
So yes, that does, it is confusing then. I can see there's a bit of confusion there as to how we see ourselves. Neither culture dominated the other. From food to language, both were pretty well balanced. We'd have roasts, but occasionally we'd have curries. I'd hear English, but when they wanted to say something, I'd hear it that the children didn't want the children to hear. They'd say it in Afrikaans. So I got both, but neither was a dominant party. it means mixed races. Mixed races, they were half castes, which was a derogatory term used for people of mixed race.
But in the past?
In the past, yes. But nowadays, in London, transcultural identities are much more acceptable.
I'd like to end my project saying that having the opportunity to delve deeper into my cultural background has brought me emotionally closer to my family. It has also given me the desire to retrace the footsteps of my grandparents in South Africa, and one day travel by taking the path of my own transcultural identity.